So, right, we're live now with the latest episode of the Moretti and a catch-up. So today is a Moretti and a cappuccino with Mike Dean from Whisper Cleans. Mike, have you got your drink?
I have got my drink. I've even got it in a Whisper Claims mug. So,
some subtle branding's gone into it as well. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So over the past few weeks, we've talked about on the series of things we've talked about. A lot of things are turning about furloughing and returning back to work. So we've talked about HR, we've talked about health and safety, we've talked about the needs to get back into the office. Last week we talked about the effects COVID had on investments and pensions, on all things money in the market. So what I really wanted to do is to really shift the focus now into getting back into work, getting back into the swing of things, and getting things kind of moving once again. So one of the obvious places for me to start was with R&D. It was something that we got involved in quite heavily with through yourselves in the back end of last year, and we've done particularly quite a significant amount of work during the lockdown period. I think the stats where we've claimed about £1.3 million worth of R&D, which has resulted in about just under £250,000 worth of cash either going into our client's bank account or it's en route from HMRC just during the COVID period. And those clients are very, very varied. So what I wanted to really do was just to have a chat with you really about how you work with us and what your there is. You're obviously there as a very much of a technical support on things and things like that. And then just to go through R&D and try to break down some barriers about the thoughts of what R&D is and the perception of R&D. So what we'll do is we'll start off then. Do you want to talk about how you work with somebody like me and things like that in terms of R&D?
Yeah, well, I mean, just a quick little bit of a story as to how we came to do what we do. So we're a software business, and we focus software and consultancy, and we focus on supporting accountants like you, Phil, to do R&D tax claims quicker and more efficiently than you otherwise would. Now, the reason why we've done that, it's not because we didn't set out to build a tool for the sake of it. We set out to try and help SMEs to more effectively access the benefits of the R&D tax scheme. And the way we felt was best to do that was to do it by working with accountants. Every business, every SME has got an accountant, and what we wanted to do is make sure that accountants could help those businesses as effectively as possible. Now, the scheme, and we'll end up talking about this, as you say, in a bit more detail, but the scheme on the face of it is very complex. So it's 500 pages of guidance notes.
I've read it.
Yeah, quite a complex piece of legislation. So it's really daunting, for the average SME owner. It is a very daunting thing to take on, and so what we've tried to do is build a really structured approach to help the accountant take their client through that process and understand whether they've got eligibility for the scheme and if they have to quickly access the benefits of the scheme.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been a great asset to our team. Historically, we would have talked about this with clients, and we would have referred it on to a third party to do that. And with referrals out to third parties, relationships generally don't quite go smoothly as they would with us. So what we've seen is you saw a lot of those break down. So it was quite frustrating. If you're kind of honest about it, it probably wasn't at the forefront of our client managers' minds because R&D was detached. We were detached from it. So getting involved with you guys at Whisper Claims has really generated some sad as this is, some excitement within the office around R&D. And I think just those numbers alone, when we talk about being able to put $250,000 in people's banks in the last 3 months alone, it just shows the power of it and the underutilization of R&D in there.
Absolutely. Well, something that, I mean, some of your clients might well have had this experience, but another driver for us doing this in the first place was that we noticed that most of the R&D tax specialists, so the bigger consultancies out there, they set a fee threshold. So they basically say a claim that's worth less than a certain amount, they won't bother supporting it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just the fee isn't good enough for them to do it. And often the message that goes back to the SME owner in that circumstance is actually, mate, you're not eligible, because it's easier,
it's easier
than to say you're too small for me to be bothered to help. So again, that was another reason for us building our software to kind of get down to the level where, almost no matter how small your claim is, there's a way of accessing help and support to get that benefit.
Absolutely, we had a client earlier on in the series actually, and a brand new startup company, and it was they're a vegan food manufacturer, and they'd been developing some sausage rolls. And realistically, their claim was quite small, but it was setting the process for things going forward. So next year's claim will be bigger, and then it'll go on and bigger and bigger and bigger as the company grows and gets more involved in R&D. So I think actually when we were actually doing one of these Moretti sessions, we actually got the confirmation too that the R&D claim had been accepted, and it was something light within about 3 weeks. And obviously, you know, there was a material sort of reduction in their capital, in their corporation tax. So it was really good. Whereas, like you say, in many cases before, you know, sort of your inception, that claim would have just been lost and it would have been ignored, and the response would have been, you're not eligible, when realistically they were. So it really has opened the doors for those kind of things in there. So that's really good.
If you look at the stats around the scheme, and HMRC publish a report every year about the uptake of the scheme and how many businesses are involved and so on. I think the last time the stats were published, which would have been towards the end of last year, we were up to about 52,000 businesses got support through the scheme the last time it was reported, and that's growing at 20% a year.
Right.
Now, the majority of that growth, well, so there's two interesting things about that. One is 52,000 out of the total business population is tiny.
Yeah.
So you often read reports that say, you know, the kind of penetration of the scheme is really low, and that there ought to be more companies claiming. And we'll perhaps touch on that in a minute. But the other thing is that 20% year-on-year growth is all at that smaller end. So that, you know, the new companies claiming inevitably tend to be perhaps younger businesses who are claiming for the first time, or the businesses who, which is really what we're talking about here, who've only just realised that actually they probably have got eligible spend, and they tend to be at the kind of lower end of the spectrum in terms of the big scheme. But, you know, actually it's really worthwhile benefits for the companies that are going for it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things is that I think us as accountants need to do is we need to break down this perception that R&D is for basically anybody who's got a man in a white coat or a woman in a white coat who might be doing clinical trials or testing on animals or whatever it might well be. It's those sorts of things. So how is it best for us to start to approach to break those barriers down with people? So we'll have people sat here watching this now who will be thinking R&D is not for me, but I've come on because Phil's asked me to, and I've got nothing else to do. It's Friday afternoon, and it's an excuse to start drinking early, which I know is why most people start drinking early. Exactly. So if we were speaking to them, how would we go about trying to break down that perception to change the thought process that they would look at their business and align the R&D sort of way of thinking?
Okay, well, so there are three things that HMRC are interested in terms of making sure that somebody's eligible, that a claim is eligible. So we just talk about those for a minute. Yeah. So the first one is that they're looking for an advance in science and technology, right? So as soon as I say that,
the viewers numbers is just plummeted.
It's like, you know, men in white coats again, isn't it? Yeah. It sounds like. So we'll explore that in a minute. So it's science and technology advance. Second thing is uncertainty. So you've got to show that there was some uncertainty around the project that was being pursued. And then the third thing is you've got to demonstrate that you've got competent professionals. So people working on these projects that have got qualifications or experience in that direct field that they're working on. So we just try and sort of unpick that. What does it really mean? So, and maybe a good way of conveying this is to try and point out what it isn't. So, so we get asked a lot about software projects, for example.
Yeah.
So, a really good way of looking at this is if you're a business that's trying to build a piece of software, and you're not a software business, okay, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to meet that criteria that I've just described. Because if you're an accountancy firm and you're setting out and you've got no one who works for your company who's a software engineer, How could you possibly be stretching the boundaries of science and technology and software engineering, and you don't employ anybody who's a software engineer? You're not going to qualify. Yeah. But on the other hand, if we take take our business, take Whisperclaim, we've claimed through the scheme 3 years on the trot. We are a software company, but of course our business is based on what is essentially a web-based tool. And on the face of it, it looks like there's no real technological advance in what we do. But actually there is, because in our world, what we're working on every day are underlying algorithms, if you like, that are breaking down a business process. So we've taken a what was previously a manual process using spreadsheets, bits of paper, etc., by people like you, trying to put an R&D claim together. We've converted that into an electronic process. We've had to work on the maths that sits behind all of that. How do we do the calculations that you would have previously done in your head or through a spreadsheet? How do we do that through an online tool? How do we write a report that you previously would have sat down and written? Our tool produces that at a button press at the end of the process. So you've got to try and unpick what is it that's going on in this business and this particular process, and try and figure where in that might there be a scientific advance. And it isn't necessarily, so in our case, as I say, we're a software company, but actually the advances in what we've done are more to do with unpicking a business process, to do with statistical, mathematical analysis and so on. Actually, it's not about the software, it's about those things. So there's a kind of, you've got to go down a layer into really trying to figure, well, what is it that we actually did when we were working on those projects that might have represented an advance in science and technology. And then you're into the uncertainty part. So how can you demonstrate that something was uncertain? And actually that's linked to the competent professionals comments. So if I put it really simply, if I've got a technical problem in my business, I'm trying to unpick a process, I'm trying to solve a particular problem, and I can Google the answer, then clearly there's no uncertainty. So I'm really breaking it down to a really base level there. But if the solution to the problem was readily accessible, then clearly you're not going to meet the criteria. But if actually, as a competent professional, somebody who's got years of experience in the particular field that you're looking at, if the answer wasn't readily deducible, it's probably R&D.
Right, I think that's a really, really valid point for businesses, isn't it? And again, like you say, with the competent professionals, there's no point me asking me to devise a software algorithm to help your business, because I'm clearly not in a position to do that. I might be a genius and get there one way in the end, but again, you're not using the right people to do it, are you? So I think so. There's a couple of big things in there, and the other one thing that I think which is really important for people to understand is that where you talk about stepping down a layer and you start talking about looking at the processes that you're potentially breaking down. So you're not setting the world alight in terms of science and technology by building the next Google or whatever it is, but you are refining and improving a process, increasing efficiency, making it quicker, faster, and sort of all those sorts of benefits for the business. So I think that's the biggest point, and particularly within our client base as well, because we don't do a lot within the manufacturing or engineering, which are historically really strong for R&D opportunities in there. We're very much sort of professional services, digital creatives, and a lot of construction as well. So there's a lot of system and process and automation that goes through in there. So I think that was a really, really valid point.
Yeah,
so
that's right. And something to be careful of, I suppose, is the distinction between commercial innovation and R&D. So we were looking at a case only a few days ago, actually, that came across our desk that was, again, it was web related, software related. So it was a company saying, we've got this really innovative fitness app. So it was all around fitness. It was actually really based on lockdown and exercise regimes that people get into while they're stuck at home. And of course, when you boiled it down, what they had in terms of branding, positioning, their marketing strategy, actually there's loads of innovation in all of that.
Yeah.
But from a technology perspective, from the things that we've just been talking about, actually, it was just a website. It was just a website hosting some videos. There was no technological advance that you could possibly put your hands on.
And I think that's a difficult differentiation to make for businesses.
Yes,
because to them it is completely revolutionary. It's completely innovative, and nobody else is doing it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter because it's the technology is available to do what it's supposed to do.
That's right. That's right. And you know, you're right. It's difficult for an entrepreneur. You know, you sit there, you put your life's blood into something, and you believe exactly what you just said. You know, what I'm doing is unique. Well, it might be commercially, it might be, but actually against these measures that HMRC set, you've got to do what we've just been talking about and go, you know, a couple of layers into it and figure out how am I meeting that criteria that HMRC is setting.
So have we got any sort of good examples of something that's a little bit obscure that would help break down this myth about men in white coats? Have you got any examples?
I asked the team prior to this call to just give me a few sort of unusual examples of things they've seen recently. And one, so this sounds really bizarre on the face of it, was a sprout farmer. So a business that specialises in growing sprouts for the big supermarkets. So, you know, against that criteria we've just been talking about, where might the technological advance exist in a sprout farmer? And in their case, it was all about process again that revolved around the production of some new machinery. So in their case, we're looking for efficiencies around gathering the harvest. So how do you collect the sprouts with a piece of machinery? How do you trim the sprouts? All of which is being done whilst you're trying to keep the things fresh and not be damaged. So their particular claim was all around that. It was all around the development of a piece of machinery to achieve that involved using different techniques for cutting the sprouts, from mechanical techniques using blades through to high pressure water jet, which I think actually is a high pressure water jet solution that they came up with in the end. So, you know, even in a business like that, where it's a farm, a large scale farm, you know, there's potential for projects within a business like that are very eligible indeed.
Yeah, just sorry, my kids are for some reason going mad in the background. They're chanting at something. I don't know what's going on. I'm assuming that they've won at Fortnite or something. So, just WhatsApping my wife, telling me, "Can you shut the kids up?"
That's it. That's the beauty of life at home in lockdown, isn't it?
So I do apologise if you did hear my kids chanting in the background. They are not football hooligans as much as they like to be, like to portray themselves as. So I do apologise. I've lost all my train of thought now.
So we're on the sprout farmer. So the thing about you know, even in a business like that, where, you know, if you were looking at it as the accountant, you know, looking in on a company like that, it might not be immediately obvious that there's something going on, but they had a project in there that was highly eligible.
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing, isn't it? I think with you sort of your traditional accountancy sort of methodology, where you work with people once a year and you speak to them, chances are you're not going to speak of the project, and by the time you get to speak to the project's done and dusted, and it's you're not aware of it, the client's not aware of it, and it's not a sort of question you go, oh, by the way, what did you do with your sprout farming techniques this year? Yeah. It's not an obvious question that rolls off the tongue. So I think that's one of the things that we've certainly tried to address over the last sort of 6 to 12 months is increasing that interaction with clients. So, you know, one of the things we launch on the 1st of July is a quarterly sit down with our clients, or a phone call or something like that, just to touch base and to explore these things a little bit more. So we're hoping that will uncover more R&D claims for them to make sure that it's a prominent part of our agenda.
One of the things that we should probably touch on then is when I mentioned this layer in the scheme, it's about uncertainty. So this measure that HMRC have, you know, they want to see that their clients dealt with some uncertainty in the project. So a measure of that, it's going to sound like an odd way of putting this, a measure of uncertainty is failure. So the mistake that people often make is that they'll look at their R&D projects from the perspective of products that they've produced. So at the end of the process, we produced a new product, we produced a new process or new service, and they'll work backwards from that to establish what was the cost of building that new thing.
Yeah.
But the reality is, most of the cost associated with achieving that outcome was probably in all the things that you tried that didn't work.
Yes.
And actually, those things that don't work are a representative of how uncertain the outcome was going to be. So,
absolutely,
in a bizarre way, and again, this is kind of a contrast to your usual entrepreneurial mindset. In a way, what you're actually looking for is the more failure, the better, because the more failure was, the harder the process must have been. Therefore, the more eligible it's likely to have been.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of looking at things, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. So okay, then we just touched on something which was a bit obscure. We just had one go through. We're just having one that we're putting together now for a client of ours who's looking at a different way of installing fence posts and the things that he's built and put things together, making efficiency, removing the labour, the manual labour, the personal injury risks, and those sorts of things. So I think one of the things he was talking about is he's been able to with the creation of this product. Basically, he's gone from being able to do 500 meters a day flat out with men hammering and injuring themselves and repetitive strain injuries and all that to 2,000 meters a day through the use of bearing that. So there's some really good things in there. So yeah, there's some quite obscure things. So what would HMRC consider not to be a good example? One of the questions I get asked all the time is we do a lot of software implementation for people. So we put a zero system in, which changes their accounting function beyond belief. And it's like, wow, this is completely different. This is everything. But it's not, because it's what the accounting system's supposed to do, isn't it?
No, exactly. And you're back to those measures again. Where's the technological advance in the field around doing that? There isn't any. All accountants are doing that, and you're using a standard piece of software in that case, implementing zero. So there's nothing, there's nothing in that kind of project. There's probably, if you don't mind, I'll read out. There's 4 things that really represent a kind of, if you like, poor examples of how people go about this. And I've just got some notes here. Just bear with me a sec.
Yeah, no problem.
Printed out a second ago. Get a long sheet of paper here. What I did was pull off some really specific examples. Should have sorted out all the paper on this settee next to me. Right. Okay. Well, let me give you. So I'll do 2 things here. I'll give you a couple of examples of claims that essentially would be rejected by HMRC. Okay, and then we'll just sort of go through what some of the red flags might be to HMRC.
Brilliant.
So one, and again, this is that contrast between the commercial attractiveness of something versus the actual scheme rules, etc. So one is a contract flooring business, a company that is producing wooden flooring from old whiskey barrels. Okay, right. High-end product, using essentially a green process. So it's all about recycling, which is fantastic. The goals of the company are fantastic. Their position in the market is great, but all they're actually doing is cutting up all whiskey barrels and
laying on the floor.
So it's that contrast of commercial advantage versus actual technological advance. So that's an example of one. I mean, we actually saw a claim that was produced for that and was submitted to HMRC and rejected for the obvious reason of technological advance. Another one. So this is a bit different. So a contract R&D company. So this is a company who's doing R&D for people. So people are going along saying, I've got this technological challenge. Can you address it for me? So on the face of it, how can that not be eligible for an R&D? Yeah. But the thing that they're falling down on is the fact that an SME can't subcontract its R&D to another SME.
Yeah.
Count. So essentially, they couldn't claim either. So that was another one that had gone through to HMRC, and they couldn't claim. So, the things that I suppose I've been pointing out are to do with this stuff about the technological advance and uncertainty and so on. But there's actually a whole host of red flags outside of that HMRC are also looking out for that might also mean that you're ineligible. So that's the thing I wanted to try and find. So that's these notes. So one is disproportionate claim size. So a huge claim set against the turnover of the business. They're gonna have a look at that. It doesn't mean you're not eligible. It just means actually
it's a flag.
Interested in taking a close look at that. Claims from unexpected sectors. So we've talked about obvious things like manufacturing and software development, etc., etc. But what about a restaurant chain, for example?
Yeah,
they're going to have a look at it without even reading it. They're going to be interested in, well, what's that all about? Again, it's another red flag. Lack of alignment with accounts is another one. So might be things like, the company's had a big grant during the year. Those grants appear in their accounts, but actually there's no account taken of the grants in their R&D claim. Again, it's going to result in somebody taking a close look at the...
I just jump in on that bit about the grants. So obviously recently there's been a lot of government support with the C-bills and the bounce back loans.
Yeah.
So now, am I right in thinking that that money there can't be used towards R&D claims and things like that, and therefore it has to state aid or something along those lines?
It can be used, but it goes through. So this is another sort of little technical nuance with the scheme. And actually, often people get a bit confused. They believe if they've taken a grant that they can't claim for R&D, and that's not true either. So the C-bill scheme and the bounce back loan scheme both count as state aid. So as far as an R&D claim is concerned, they're actually treated in the same way as a grant.
Yeah.
So what that means is, if you've used that money that's come in from, let's say, a C-bill claim, you've used that money on your R&D, then it has to go through what's called the RDEC scheme, which is actually the large company scheme, even if you're an SME. So essentially the return on it, the tax benefit is reduced.
Yeah.
So the way to overcome that, of course, is if you have taken a C-bills or bounce back loan, then you just need to be careful how you use it. So it's fine to use that on any other aspect of the business, or at least in accounting terms, to use it on any other aspect of the business. But if you've used it on R&D, then you'll get this reduced return.
This reduced rate.
It's important to kind of position the use of those funds in a way that, make sure you can maximize.
They can be discounted from the R&D if applicable. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. That.
I think that's it. That's an important thing for people to raise, because I know there's a lot of confusion around that point out there at the moment. So people, I've had a bounce back loan, I can't have R&D. Well, they weren't even thinking they could have R&D before. We've just got them thinking they could have R&D, and now they've had a bounce back loan. They don't. No, I can't do R&D.
And if you use that money on sales and marketing, for example, then perfect. That's not affecting their ability to do an R&D claim.
Yeah, brilliant. Was there any other red? Because I obviously interrupted you mid-flow there. Was there any other red flags, or do you think you covered most of them?
I think I covered most of them. The last one on this list is kind of right back to square one, which is it just doesn't look like R&D. And what does that mean? What does that mean in HMRC's eyes? It's back to this scientific or technological advancement and uncertainty. And as I say, that's about peeling back the layers and just understanding what was it we actually did to meet that particular challenge in the business. And something I should have said earlier on, again, is an important principle. R&D tax claims can be made against not just product advances, but also service and process as well. So don't let your clients kind of lose sight of that. It's not all about products.
No, that's good. So so we've talked a bit about what can and can't be included, what the red flags are. So what's the benefit of doing R&D then, from your point of view? What do you see it as in terms of how does it support the business owners?
Okay, well, I mean, technically, so in accounting terms, if you like, the big benefit is any spend that is deemed as eligible spend. So you can honestly say that it meets the criteria we've been talking about. Then that spend is enhanced by 130% in the accounts. So you spent, let's say, £100,000 on activities that we deem as R&D, then in their accounts that goes in as 230k, with the obvious benefit, therefore, of reducing the tax bill. But if it puts the company into a loss-making situation, or the company was already in a loss-making situation, there's actually more to it. There's the opportunity to essentially cash in that surrenderable loss and get 14.5% of that loss as a cash payment. So the cash benefits are potentially huge, either through a reduction in your corporation tax bill or through getting cash back through the scheme. So, I mean, we found in these last 3 months during lockdown a real upturn in interest in the scheme, because it's a really quick turnaround benefit. You can look back 2 years, so it's not just the current financial year you're in. You can go back 2 years and go back over those accounts. So if you think about a company right now who's cash strapped, there's an opportunity to do potentially two claims and pull in that cash benefit as of now. HMRC are currently reporting a 28-day turnaround. I don't know what you found with the claims you put.
28-day, pretty much 28 days. What it is. Some have been stretched out a little bit, and I think that's because we put quite. I don't know if that's because we put a couple of back-to-back claims in, so it's a couple of ones that maybe some are close to the wire, so you're almost just stitching out of time, and it just seems to be that. But it seems to be, it's a strange thing for me, because it seems to be the second claim goes through first, but the first claim goes through second. So we seem to get the approval on the second year as before we get the approval on the first year.
Right.
I don't know why. I don't know if that's because that's actually more of a refund position, wherever that one's a reduction of tax. I don't know. I might be speculating there, but it just seems bizarre that every single job has come back. The second year has been come through before the first year.
Right.
And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because it's an amendment and it goes through a different process of analysis.
They might go to a different team.
Yeah.
That might be why. I believe HMRC have got 5 processing centres now around the country.
Wow.
And they don't necessarily, those claims, even though they're from the same client, I don't think they'll necessarily be even going to the same centre, let alone the same team. So that might be something
makes sense. Doesn't make sense to a degree, because it's assessed in multiple different ways then by different people, isn't it? And if it gets through. So one of the quick things I wanted to ask you is, if you put a claim into HMRC and they have a look at it and they deem it to be ineligible, what's the consequence of that?
Well, what people refer to is inquiry. So an HMRC inquiry, and really what that starts with is a letter. So it's a letter from HMRC to the claimant. So it will go to your client, not to you. And it usually the first letter is just for them to say, we're having a look at it. So it really doesn't give any detail. We're having a look at your claim, and we'll be back in touch. In a number of weeks. The next letter that comes through is usually with a few specific questions. And actually, the first thing to say is that first letter doesn't necessarily mean that they're even going to come back with any questions. So on occasion, it might be in a few weeks' time, they write back and say, we have had a look at it, and actually everything's fine. If they want to go further, they'll come back with a second letter with a list of questions. And usually that first pass is about evidence. So what evidence have you got for the things that you've put in your claim? So it's really important, as you're going through the claim process in the first place, to identify that evidence and make sure that you really have got it. So it might be that they want to have a look at evidence. If you go kind of beyond that, it can result in interviews. So they may well want to talk to the client directly about whatever answers they've provided to that second stage. Worst case scenario, where somebody hasn't gone through a thorough exercise, as you and I would expect them to, if they haven't done that, and companies are known to, just put a number into their corporation tax return, and essentially make it up, then, the ultimate sanction is HMRC claim that money back, and there's no there's no leeway on that. There's no payment terms. It's immediately payable.
It's immediately payable.
Yeah, so that just means that this process we've been talking about, it's really important to go through it in a structured way and make sure that in putting a claim together, you're addressing HMRC's issues up front, because
Issue of concerns.
you don't want to end up in a situation where you might ultimately owe some money back to them, but you don't want the hassle of that inquiry
No.
process with
And
HMRC.
would there be penalties on a misclaim if it was an innocent misclaim, or is it just we paid you we want it back?
There's different flavours. So usually it's down to just them claiming the money back, whatever it was that was paid out. There are exceptions to that, of course. It could be in an extreme case it's deemed as fraud, in which case clearly that's a different thing.
That's a different thing, yeah. But for somebody who puts a genuine claim in, believes that there's R&D and have potentially gone through a good process, it would be a case of, well, the money needs to come back.
If the outcome is that there's no claim at all, often, I mean, we've been very lucky in our business that we've worked on 600 claims now through our platform, and none of those have gone to inquiry. So hopefully that's an indication of the process that you and I are working to at the minute.
Absolutely, it shows the robustness of that. So that's really positive. So I mean, I just did one pick because with the VAT claims, if you get something wrong with VAT accidentally, they'll come in and whack you for 30%.
Well, that's it.
People are petrified of dealing with the revenue, but this is a much safer, assuming you do follow the right process. If you just stick a number on a tax comp and say I've done £1 million worth of R&D, that's fraud.
You're going to be in trouble.
You're going to be in trouble. Unless you're just really good at guessing, and there is an R&D claim, but it's unlikely.
That's true. But the scenario you paint there, where you've got a genuine claim and maybe you've made a mistake, you've misunderstood the legislation, or there's something in there.
500 pages of it after all, isn't it?
Yeah, the outcome of that process I described, that interaction with HMRC, can often be essentially settling somewhere in between, perhaps, where there's an element of eligibility you might have overclaimed. They're not going to come back for all of it if there is eligibility there. But as I say, it all comes back down to making sure that the process in the first place is thorough and robust. And then you shouldn't end up in that situation. Now, it's worth saying that those red flags I mentioned earlier on, some of those could potentially result in an inquiry. So that one that I mentioned about disproportionate claim size, for instance, where we had one go through where I think the claim was for something like 60% of the turnover of the business. And it was a big claim, so £6.5–7 million worth of eligible spend. So you would expect that HMRC are going to look at that.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's such a high proportion of the.
Well, it's like a VAT refund, isn't it? As soon as you put a VAT refund in, they want to know what it is.
But in that case, it didn't go to inquiry, but it definitely got read. Attention was paid to it at HMRC's end. So to a certain extent, there are things in a claim, or there are things in other aspects of the company's trading history. You've mentioned VAT returns there. A VAT inquiry for somebody who's put an R&D claim in would probably also result in them looking at the R&D claim.
Yeah, because they look at everything, don't they?
Yeah.
Which makes sense because the one-stop visit, there's more chance of recovery, which ultimately now is what HMRC's investigations are all about. It's all about recovery of overclaims or misclaims or underpayments. So it's not so much just checking you're doing things right anymore. It's about it's a commercial business now, isn't it? I mean, that's what they've been briefed with.
That's right.
I think the last I read was 33 billion that they've been tasked with a year in recovering of underpaid or non-paid taxes. And that's not going, most people say, well, you just got to Starbucks and knock on their door. It's not as easy to go knock on their door as it is to come and knock on ours, is it anymore?
That's true. And it's probably worth saying, just while we're on the HMRC inquiries side of things, if you listen to our sector, so you listen to the R&D tax specialists, you'll hear them say they've got 100% track record. There are many of them in their marketing say 100% success rate. Now, the reality is that might actually be because no one at HMRC has ever read any of their reports. Could be one because the reality is that the sample rate, if you like, of these returns is actually very low.
Yeah.
So we think, and HMRC don't publish any stats around this, but we think about between 1% and 2% of R&D claims go to inquiry. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's a very small number. But the reality is, so on the face of it, that says, going back to what we said a minute ago, that says, well, I might as well just put a number in the corporation tax and hope for the best. But the reality is, that the downside of doing that is massive. So what you really need to do is make sure that every claim has a report associated with it that accounts for all the things that we've just been talking about. So make sure that we're describing where the advance is, and that we have got competent professionals, etc., etc. And the reason why that's important is it's all about staving off inquiries. It's making sure that you're not in that 1 or 2%.
You're not in that 1 or 2%, yeah, because there will be rogue claims with massive red flags all over them. Yeah. And if your report has gone in with a robust and solid sort of background, they're going to go, that's less of a risk than this number of £1 million quid on a compensation tax. Yeah.
And for all the reasons we said before, VAT return, other issues in the corporation tax return, you can never say, 100% that your claim's not going to go to inquiry. But the more you do to make it as robust as possible, the less likely that is.
I think that's important. So basically, anybody watching, don't do your R&D claim yourself, get me to do it. That's what we're basically saying, isn't it?
Exactly.
So, I mean, that was my next question, really, was going to be what kind of makes a good application and what are the things to avoid. So we've kind of covered that one, really. So probably really my last question before I ask you what you think your biggest takeaways in recent months is, if people listening today have something's pricked their ears about R&D, what should be the next step that they should take?
Well, the first thing would be to talk to you, because obviously the way we work together is we've given you the tools to answer the questions that we've just been talking through, and I guess I suppose there's a big sales message in this somewhere that we've tried to make that process as pain-free as possible, and using our technology in sort of combination with your expertise means that that your clients should be able to get through this process much quicker than they would not only doing it themselves, but actually talking to sort of run-of-the-mill consultants out there as well. And why am I able to say that? Perhaps just jump on this for a second. Usually it takes anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, sometimes months, for the normal consultative approach to putting an R&D claim together. It can be quite a painful exercise. So one of the things we focused on in our product was to make it, as I say, a much quicker process. So in general, those 600 claims I talked about in the process so far, in general, that process takes under 2 hours, start to finish. So you go in and meet the client, you work through the process with them. At the end of that process, there's a robust report coming out of it based on all the inputs. And I guess that's a key thing here, is that we're trying to take as much pain out of the process as possible.
Yeah, I must admit, well, we did a couple of R&D claims in the past, pre-working with you guys, and it was the bane of your life, because it was so hard working, collating the information, obtaining the information, then putting the damn thing into a reasonably written report. It just it ended up being weeks and months. And then, be honest, it's one of the things that, oh God, I've got 9 months to do it. I don't really need to think about it, so I won't, because you just didn't want to do it. It's one of those horrible jobs that you could see sat in the corner of your desk thinking, I've got to do that at some point. So we stayed away from it, but now it's completely, it's flawless. I mean, I did two interviews yesterday with clients. Really? Yesterday afternoon. So that's how quick and easy and painless the process is. It's just we catch the information, we'll put all the report together, we'll put all the narratives together, we'll put the numbers together, and because we've got the accounts, we just need to know what to look at. We can pull it all together. So like yesterday, it was just a case of just, you tell me what's gone on, tell me where you spent your money, and I'll do the rest. And then basically it'll come in, and those claims will be one of those claims will be particularly substantial, and one of the other claims will be a bit smaller. But again, it's still in effect money they would never have had before. And in certain times like this, it's
the key thing to remember, of course, is the government want you to have it. It's there to encourage more of this kind of innovative behavior, and in the end to try and change the develop the economy and change the landscape that we're all working in. So,
Absolutely.
it's not something to ignore. It's something to embrace and get access to.
And like you say, the government want us to embrace in this. That's why they increased the rates on the percentage in the last budget, didn't they? So it's definitely something they are thoroughly behind, because again, if they can help businesses advance and become more efficient and more profitable, they will ultimately tax you more because you'll make more money. So that's the incentive why the government, people have probably started thinking, why the hell would the government want to give me money? Because it's an investment in the future, effectively. I'll give you some money now and I'll take it back off you tenfold in 10 years' time. But we don't care because we made 10 times as much money anyway. So it's almost irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. So it works for them on a really, really good level. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, I mean, that covers all my questions, Mike. I mean, have you got anything else you want to get across, or do you want to give us your sort of biggest takeaway from what's gone on particularly over the last 3 months and how R&D has played a part?
Well, I mean, on that front, the thing that, and I suppose to a certain extent, we were surprised by this, but surprised by it in a pleasant way, given the nature of our business. That the uptake of the scheme in these last 3 months has been huge, certainly in terms of what we've seen. So we're probably about perhaps 40% up over the last 3 months in terms of the number of players rolling through the platform. So people are recognising the immediate cash flow benefit of accessing the scheme. But equally, there are so many more businesses out there that are not doing that. So I guess that the message there is that if you've got an inkling that you might have done something that's eligible, or maybe even you just want to explore whether it was eligible, it's worth having that conversation, because it is, you just said, it's cash that's there, that's easy and ready to access.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you say, it's been one of those things that has really. It's done wonders for COVID has done wonders for the R&D companies in the world, hasn't it? Let's be honest, and things like that. So it's there's some positive that's come out of the darkness, I suppose. So. Yeah. I mean, that's it from me, Mike, to be honest. Ian Hayes has said thank you very much. It's very informative. Somebody's cottoned on to the fact that my kids are, in fact, Leeds fans. And that's what the cheering was about, because they were on the television, which is particularly painful for a devout old City fan like myself.
I'm glad I didn't have my Everton mug instead of my
Oh, there'd have been some war in here. There's a lot of Liverpool fans watching this. So there'd have been wars there. But yeah, so someone's picked up on that as well. So. Other than that, that's it. All that's left for me to do is to thank you, Mike, for your time this afternoon. As Ian says, it's been massively informative. It's been, I hope it's given the people that are watching and the people that watch this on the repeats and things like that, the confidence to think about R&D in their thought process. Ian's making me laugh because he's now chanting Leeds, 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 go on the boys. So he's now throwing me off my thought. This is the problem with live comments, because people put you off. Normally there's a guy called Carl Wilson who's watching who gets me to try and down the pint, which always makes me chuckle as well. So I've completely lost my train of thought on that. So it's been really, really good. So that's all that's left to be doing. So thank you so much for your time. You're a busy man and you've been brilliant. So that's it from me and Mike. The only thing that I have left to say is next week we are back with Will Davies from Radish Tax, who will be talking all things other taxes than R&D, because we've covered that today. So that's about it from me. One final thing is just a big thank you to Marianne Smith, who has been instrumental in the formation of Moretti and the Moretti series. She's been working with us throughout the COVID period, and as we come out of lockdown now, her time with us is moving on. So because she's helped us so much that we're in need of a full-time internal person. So she's moving on. So she's been instrumental in this. So just a big thank you to Marianne and for the success this has been. And so we wish her all the best for the future. So thank you very much, Mike. Take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers now. Bye.
Cheers, Phil.